Said yes to the job, but he wants a bigger role. What can Tony Blair make of his new task as Middle East peace envoy, and what are his chances of success? This is Inside Story. Hello, I'm Imran Gabda. Tony Blair begins his quest this week to win peace in the Middle East. It's a road travelled by many, and he brings more than a fair share of baggage to the job. So just how much can he achieve? Mr. Blair will meet leaders of the so-called Quartet in Portugal on Thursday in his new role as their envoy. The Quartet's made up of the four key global powers involved in the search for peace: the US, Russia, the EU and the United Nations. At the meeting, they're expected to discuss in detail exactly what part the former UK Prime Minister will play in bringing a solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. He said to want a wider remit than the one outlined so far, which is to focus on winning international aid for the Palestinians and help them rebuild the Palestinian Authority into a viable ruling body for an independent state. But first, Blair will need to resolve the issue of who the negotiating parties will be. Washington doesn't want Blair to negotiate with Hamas, the faction that took control of Gaza last month. Both the European Union and Russia favour dialogue with the group. But that's if Hamas even agrees to talk. Hamas does not accept the Quartet's roadmap solution. And while Israel and the Palestinian Authority both welcomed Blair's appointment, Hamas has criticised it. It says Blair hasn't previously been helpful in solving conflicts in the Middle East and accuses him of adopting American and Israeli positions. Well, on his last day as Prime Minister, Blair had this to say about what he believes needs to happen in Israel and the occupied territories.
The absolute priority is to try to give effect to what is now the consensus across the international community, that the only way of bringing stability and peace to the Middle East is a two-state solution, which means a state of Israel that is secure and confident of its security, and a Palestinian state that is not merely viable in terms of its territory, but in terms of its institutions and governance.
Well, we're joined by our guests in London: George Jones, political editor of the Daily Telegraph; Abdul Bari Atwan, he's the editor of the Al-Quds Al-Arabi newspaper; and in Jerusalem, Gil Hoffman, chief correspondent and columnist at the Jerusalem Post. Gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us. George Jones, if I could start off with you. Blair's exact role is a bit murky at present. What do you think it will be exactly?
Well, Blair wants to give an impetus to the peace process. He believes it has stalled. He had hoped that if the Iraq war had been successful and Iraq had been created as a democratic state, then that would have helped the Middle East peace process. That has not happened, and he now, I think, sees resolving the Palestine-Israel question as crucial now to the whole of a Middle East peace process. He is a world statesman. Yes, he may be criticised by countries like Syria, Iran. Hamas may have doubts about him, but Tony Blair is a man who can go to Washington and have the ear of President George Bush. He can go to Moscow and have the ear of President Putin. I think he is trusted in Israel. So that's the thing that Tony Blair brings to this, is he is a world-class statesman. And of course, he also has experience in Northern Ireland, where he there brought peace after 20 or 30 years of civil war in part of the United Kingdom, by taking bold gambles, by trusting people who were formerly terrorists, by bringing them in to a peace process. So I think he believes he has the international clout and the negotiating ability and the experience of helping to solve a previous sort of seemingly intractable terrorist war. That's what he brings to the table.
All right, Gil Hoffman, are Israelis happy with the appointment?
I think Israelis are definitely happy with the appointment. They see someone with Tony Blair's stature as exactly what is needed here to get the peace process back on the ground. It's going to be very hard for either side, the Israeli side or the Palestinian side, to say no to someone of the caliber of Tony Blair. And so having him involved will really force both sides to get involved, and both sides really do have the same interest, and that's improving the lives of the Israeli and the Palestinian people. And I think that the Israelis really appreciate the fact that Tony Blair, after working hard for 10 years as Prime Minister in Britain, instead of going on the lecture circuit and becoming a millionaire, has decided to keep on working and now to try to solve this difficult conflict.
Abdul Bari Atwan, some say that Blair only got this position because of his subservience to the US in the past, and this was almost a reward for that. What do you make of that, and how do you foresee his role developing?
Well, I believe it is a reward from President George Bush to his, most trusted poodle in the Middle East. So I think here we are. It is nepotism from the American administration to a loyal servant. Tony Blair actually is lost his credibility completely in the Middle East. His legacy based in wars and the death of 1 million Iraqi, dismembering of a stable country, and creating more actually problems in the Middle East. His policies encouraged Al-Qaeda, encouraged other radical organization, and he was in power for 10 years, and every Labour Party conference he used to promise the establishment of independent, viable Palestinian state, and until now we have nothing like this. And also to say that he is very close to President Bush, yes, he is very close to the President Bush. Yes, President Bush listened to him, but if he didn't listen to him when he was in power, the Prime Minister of the closest ally of the United States, do you think he will listen to him when he is now just a staff, just employee of President Bush in that part of the world? And even President Bush is not alone. There is European, there is also Moscow, there is the United Nations. So I think it is actually time consumption. This man is a spin doctor. He deceived his own people. He deceived the international community. He went to war based on lies and deception. So how can we trust him? How can we actually reward him for his crimes in the Middle East? He should be tried. He should be charged as a war criminal responsible for the tragedy of 25 million Iraqis. And we can see his legacy in the Middle East is very clearly. So I think he actually should be, as I said, he should be tried, and he should not be received in the Middle East as envoy. He should be received as a warmonger, as a criminal who destroyed our part of the world.
Gil Hoffman, it's clear that many would see it as a case of the fox in charge of the hen house. What do you make of that?
Not at all. Tony Blair and President Bush are doing everything possible to end the Middle East conflict. They've tried to give the Arab people hope by bringing them democracy. When they've done that, unfortunately, much of the Arab world has made wrong choices in not supporting the kind of moderate leaders that would improve their lives. And now Tony Blair is going to be devoting his full attention to trying to help the Palestinian people, to trying to build up a peaceful Palestinian state, to try to show the Palestinian people how wonderful their lives could be. And I think that although he might not be received so warmly right now on the Palestinian street, after he hopefully succeeds in improving the lives of the Palestinian people, he's going to be remembered warmly and thanked by, I think, everyone in the region.
George Jones, can we expect him to pursue the policy of isolating Hamas, starving Hamas and boosting Mahmoud Abbas?
Well, there's no doubt that he will put the pressure on Hamas to recognize the state of Israel, to renounce violence and terrorism, and to sort of accept previous agreements. And I think unless Hamas agrees to do that, it's going to be very difficult to bring Hamas to the table. And yes, I think he will boost the Abbas administration. But I think Tony Blair knows, I mean, everything that's been said by my colleague about Tony Blair and Iraq, Tony Blair knows that. This is an opportunity for Tony Blair, in a way, to redeem himself, to try and show that he can do something positive, that he can do something for the Middle East. And I don't think he's going to be George Bush's poodle. I think he's going to bring zeal, commitment, 24 hours, 7-day-a-week determination to try and do something in the Middle East and this intractable dispute. And that, I think, is what Tony Blair is going to bring to it. He knows his reputation is in shreds over Iraq, and one way of trying to restore that and get credibility, and I think his own peace of mind, is to do something in the Middle East. And that is why I think he will not be, doing what Israel wants. He will not be doing what Washington wants. But at least I think if he comes and tells them something, they will perhaps trust him. And that's the key thing that Tony Blair brings, I think, to this, despite Iraq, is credibility and commitment.
Credibility and commitment. Abdul Bari Atwan, you initially said that he has no credibility in the Middle East. And as George Jones mentioned, isn't it time for some redemption? Can't the people in the Middle East give Blair a second chance?
Well, actually, Mr. Jones is too optimistic, to be honest. We have a saying in Arabic, the criminal always hovering on the crime theater. And it seems Tony Blair is going to the Middle East again, maybe to plan for another crimes in that part of the world. I believe, the man, as I said, he was in power for 10 years, and he could not actually convince or convene a peace conference in London. And when he invited his Israeli friends, they said no, and it was a huge embarrassment for him. This was about 2 years ago. So I don't think the man is fit for this job. And even if he is behaving as if the Palestinians are occupying the Israeli territories. It's not the Israeli who are occupying the Palestinian territories. And if he's not going to talk to Hamas simply because it is a terrorist organization and the American and the European
let me pose that to Gil Hoffman. Gil Hoffman, let me bring you in here. How can Blair achieve anything whatsoever without talking to Hamas?
Well, first of all, he's going to focus on the West Bank. Israel already withdrew from every inch of the Gaza Strip at the cost of lives in Israel, risking Israeli security. And right now, everyone's looking to see what the future of the West Bank is going to be, because everyone has a different opinion about where the final border in the West Bank will be there. And one thing that he's going to do there is he's going to build up Mahmoud Abbas and the Fatah party and show the Palestinian people how good their lives could be over there. He's going to work on building a democracy in the West Bank and show the people in Gaza that their lives could be better. And so that's what he's really going to be focusing on at this point. I think that there's really no point right now in speaking to Hamas. Hamas is in charge of the Gaza Strip. Israel's not there. Fatah's not there. And they have their opportunity over there while Tony Blair has his opportunity in the West Bank. I got to see about 13 months ago, I was in London to accompany Prime Minister Ehud Olmert to his meetings with Tony Blair, and I got to see how the two men, it was very hot that day, they took off their jackets and they got to work, and I saw that he's really willing to do what's necessary to move the peace process forward, and that's going to be in the West Bank with Fatah at this point, and the Gaza Strip is going to have to wait until later, and so will Hamas.
All right, gentlemen, stay with us. Time for a short break. When we come back, we ask, what specific hurdles will Tony Blair be facing as he embarks on his new job? Do stay with us.